All right, we're gonna get started. Thank you all for being here. I'm Malachi Heineke. I'm the president of Debate Club, and I'm pleased to say that I got to partner with CS Club to bring this wonderful debate between Professor Hahn, who is professor of philosophy, and um, Dr. Locklair, who is a professor of computer science, focusing largely on AI. Some important news to note, um, this context for this debate. The CELT, which is our like learning focus, Center for Excellence and Learning and Teaching, has decided to focus on AI next year. So this is a good prelude to what we will be seeing from our CLT next year. So on that note, we're going to be discussing, does AI have a positive impact on higher education? Professor Hahn will be arguing, surprisingly, for the positive impact, while Dr. Locklear will be arguing against it. We will begin with openers from each, and they'll be each 6 minutes. Am I speaking here? Yeah, you guys are on the mic. Oh.
Guy who doesn't know how to work a mic is going to tell you all about AI. To my students, there's a sign-up sheet up there. For the extra credit, make sure you sign it, please. Well, thank you for the invitation, Malachi, and thank you to everyone for being here. I hope this will be a fruitful way to start off the discussion that we're all going to need to have when we get here in the fall, because things are moving fast and they're only going to move faster. Go ahead. In 2023, Luke Ferreter, a 21-year-old student at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, used generative AI to analyze X-rayed ink patterns on an ancient scroll that had been destroyed in the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. The destroyed scroll, it turned out, belonged to an Epicurean philosopher who was living not long before Christ. These are the philosophers who dialogue with St. Paul in Acts 17. Without AI in the university, we would never know what this scroll said, because, lava had destroyed it. This is just one of the many good things that AI has done and can do in the university. And so, as I'll be arguing tonight, AI will prove to have a net positive effect in the long run in higher education. I have 3 points. First point, new technology cannot be escaped, and it is hopeless to ignore it. Imagine how the Reformation would have gone if the reformers ignored the printing press. Protestants would have lagged far behind Roman Catholics in communicating their ideas. Perhaps Luther himself would never have achieved fame. Now, keep in mind, the industries of the world recognize that new technology can't be escaped. And these industries are not going to stop evolving just because the universities decide not to play along. A few examples. In health professions, AI can be used to diagnose diseases more accurately than any human manual or doctor can by taking all kinds of patterns from skin and vital signs and much more accurate probability than a human being could do. In finance, AI can analyze massively complex data sets. So we're talking about millions of transactions in seconds. And this is helpful for detecting fraud. It's helpful for detecting money laundering. And these are the sorts of things that industry is doing already with AI. In shipping, this is one of my favorites. Generative AI can predict product demand, optimize warehouse storage, reroute traffic in real time. So, okay, Amazon driver, you have to turn here instead, because somehow down the line, that's going to affect the bottom line for the company. A human would never know that, and a human couldn't do that. Imagine an Amazon package that's never late. So I think tonight's question, does AI have a net positive effect on education, might be a little bit misguided. As a service-oriented university, Concordia must ask instead, Given AI's impact on the world, which is here and is coming and can't be avoided, will we equip our students to join that world or not? Do we want all the best new research on medicine, finance, business to come from Lakeland, WOC, Marquette, UWM? Why not Concordia too? You either play along or you fall behind. And falling behind is a negative. So to restate my point, new technology cannot be escaped. Second point, AI helps universities directly. Here's a few examples of universities that are currently using AI to help their students in their research. At Stanford, researchers have built an AI model which can detect cancer by synthesizing more types of data than a manual written by a human being ever could do. You're faster, you're more accurate, and as time goes on and you collect more data, you're even more accurate. At Duke University, AI is used to predict which students are most likely to drop out and complete, which students are most likely to get what grade. This can optimize interventions. It can optimize financial aid. There's questions in there, right? Perhaps AI could be used to do some of the grunt work of administrators, interpreting and enforcing school policy, scheduling meetings, optimizing course offerings, sending emails. With the grunt work off their plate, administrators could return their valuable academic talents to the classroom. No more waiting for an email from the registrar. The AI will set you up immediately. You could be at a basketball game, doing your schedule. The AI will do it for you. The Board of Regents would have immediate access to program mission standards with direct influence on how the AI makes decisions. Let's not forget campus operations. At Purdue, AI is used by the maintenance department to interpret sensors on pumps and chillers and other equipment like that to determine when the equipment is likely to fail. And at a university the size of Purdue, right, higher education isn't just Concordia, it's massive universities. There's a lot of equipment to keep track of. Despite these massive benefits, AI has skeptics. And it's true. For some specific assignments in some classes, AI is bad. You don't want students using AI to do creative writing. You don't want students to write their Christian Citizen paper with AI. Okay. You don't want to use AI in a debate to respond to your opponent, which is something I thought of doing for fun. Just put into ChatGPT, how would you respond to this argument? See if I win. Okay, so for some assignments, you don't want to do it. However, AI can be a valuable tool for advanced students to quickly locate, summarize, and critique the literature on a given topic, as long as you still talk to your professors. These benefits outweigh the costs of some students cheating because, let's face it, people will cheat. Policing AI is impossible anyway. The students who want to use it will use it. Instead of complaining about AI, professors should ask, why does a student care so little about my assignment that he feels the need to cheat? You don't cheat on things or on people that you really care about. So maybe this assignment was a bad idea in the first place, and I need to rethink it. But I contend, and this is my closing point, AI does not create problems for the university. It exposes problems that are already there so that we can no longer ignore them. I'll say that again. AI does not create problems for the university. It exposes problems that are already there so we can no longer ignore them. Since policing AI is impossible, problems can be easily avoided with some creative lesson planning. So I maintain that we should embrace the benefits of AI at the university.
Thank you, Professor Hahn. Now, Dr. Locklair.
Ready when you are. All right. Thank you, Professor Hahn, for that introduction. What I want to do with my time here is to lay out sort of my approach to this because this is a massive topic, and I think we need to spend, as Professor Hahn said, a lot of time talking about this. But I think it's important that you understand where I'm coming from as I talk about this. My first premise is that higher education, as it's currently constituted, is deeply flawed and needs to be rethought from the ground up. So you probably need to keep that in mind as I'm giving you some of my answers here. As Plutarch said, education is not the filling of a pail, but it's the lighting of a fire. And to some of Professor Hahn's point, I think that we do sometimes focus too much on the filling of the pail, which results in some of the problems that he described. I also believe that higher education should not be as focused on career training as it currently is, but instead the goal should be to create educated citizens. Certainly, job skills are a part of what we do here, but they aren't the ultimate goal as much as things like critical thinking. Learning how to learn is a phrase that my students get sick of hearing me say, I'm sure, the number of times that I say it. There are many different forms of AI, and as Dr. Hahn, Professor Hahn listed a lot of them there, there's no question that AI has been around for a long time. It was not invented by OpenAI in 2022. A lot of the uses that he described there are not necessarily what we would consider the generative models that are causing all the hype and excitement these days. I'm going to focus on the issue of generative AI, and I'm going to define that as a system that's essentially, to oversimplify a little bit, autocorrect on steroids. A generative AI like ChatGPT is something that's trained to predict what is statistically the most likely symbol to come after another sequence of symbols. And I think that is the key to understanding both its good uses and its poor uses. It's probabilistic and it cannot be otherwise. I also firmly believe that every student should absolutely learn about AI. You should learn what it is, how it works, all of the different kinds, generative, other types of machine learning, other types of logic-based machine learning, because that is absolutely a part of our world here in the 21st century. There is no escaping it, and it does have a lot of good uses. And it does have potential good uses, location of information. I know helping students with programming assignments and other sorts of things. But with those advantages come some risks. The first, in my mind, is that generative AI is probabilistic. It's always based on statistics. It is never guaranteed to give the correct results. Even if it's given you the correct answer 99 times before, the 100th time might be the time when it hallucinates, when it makes a wrong prediction. And that's a particular problem for college students because you do not have the foundational knowledge yet in many cases to identify when the system does this. If you have the knowledge and you're able to evaluate what you get back, then it can be a useful tool. But if you start to accept what the system gives you simply because it's coming from the AI system, which remember is probabilistic, has no concept of truth, only what's likely, then you're likely to get yourself into a little bit of trouble with incorrect information. Read a number of studies recently, including, interestingly, some studies that are financed in part by Microsoft that state that relying on AI can harm critical thinking skills. Again, when you accept what you're given without having the knowledge to analyze what is being said. The intention of higher education should be to develop individuals in mind, body, and spirit. The intention of generative AI is always to predict the statistically most likely response to a given prompt. I'm not convinced that those intentions are always in alignment. And as an academic, another thing that I would note is that for generative AI in particular, it's difficult to determine the exact source of the information it provides. ChatGPT is not a database. It does not store information. It stores numbers that represent how likely it is for symbols to follow other symbols. Now, it can do web searches, it can analyze information online, but it does not store a database. And as an academic, I believe being able to trace the source of information is important. I also question many of the motives of the people who are creating generative AI because it is very easy to manipulate the system by controlling the data that it's trained on. It is not that hard to get a system to give the results that you want it to give simply by training it on some data and not others, by defining for the system what is true and what is not. So while I would certainly agree we should learn about it, we should even use it in some cases, we should not rely on generative AI. And I think that if college students do that for their assignments as they're building their foundational knowledge, it's going to cause problems later on as you get into complex scenarios that AI can't handle. As you try to apply your critical thinking and reasoning skills that it doesn't have. So my contention, as strange as it might be from the computer science professor, is I believe that there could be a net negative impact.
Thank you, Dr. Locklair. We are going to move to rebuttals now, and I'm going to figure out, I'm going to switch this time. All right. Professor Hahn, you are up.
Well, I appreciate the discussion of and the explanation of what generative AI is exactly. Symbol matching. Western thought folks might remember the Chinese room thought experiment. This is the discussion of, by John Searle, what is AI really? Well, it's just taking a symbol, matching it to another symbol at scale probabilistically. That's true. And I'm very happy to have that definition in hand. However, I don't think we have an argument yet that the net effect of AI on the university is negative. I agree we shouldn't rely on it, especially not in those classes where we are teaching students how to learn. So I would say in Western thought, probably we shouldn't have AI. And in Christian Citizen, we probably shouldn't have AI. But professors should design assignments that are creative enough that you guys don't feel like you want to use AI. Maybe the assignment is dialoguing with your roommate and then reporting to the class. Maybe the assignment is go to ChatGPT, put in the prompt, see how good of a summary that prompt is, dialogue with it, see if you can, hone your reasoning skills on the AI. Now, these are examples of how you are not relying on the AI, but you're just sort of engaging it, you're using it, it's a tool. It's not something to rely on. I agree that universities should not primarily be job training, although I think people can get a little weird about that. It is job training, in a lot of ways. You guys are all going to have jobs, and hopefully you're learning things that matter for that. One of the ways that students can learn how to learn regarding the jobs they are going to have, which is going to use AI, is to learn how to generate effective prompts that are more likely to generate truth. One is never sure when one picks a book up off a library shelf, whether it's going to be true either. So it might be an equal opportunity employer in terms of truth-orientedness. Yes, AI can hallucinate, and there are famous cases of, say, a law student at a high-profile institution used AI to write his entire legal brief. The AI hallucinated cases from courts that never existed. That got the student in trouble. So we shouldn't be doing that. Maybe this means that we ban it from core classes, but again, you can't ban it. People are going to use it. You ban it from the school network, people have data on their phones. So the authoritarian solution, I'm afraid, is not going to work here. So while we shouldn't rely on AI, no, we should build skills that are foundational so people can recognize what's true, build skills in AI, good prompting, understanding what it's doing and what it's not, and at the end of the day, recognizing that the benefits do outweigh the risks.
Thank you, Professor Hahn. Dr. Locklair.
Well, I certainly agree that the authoritarian solution is not the solution. You can't ban a new technology or a website that's never been done before. I always laugh in science fiction when they talk about banning AI research in the movies. And what happens? Somebody does it anyway. So it's certainly not possible to do that. There is value in use. One of my problems with teaching students to prompt system is in the fact that these systems are constantly changing. They're being updated. They're being trained in different ways. And the same prompt may not continue to give you the same responses in the future. One of the problems with generative AI is that the training is not straightforward. You cannot simply give the machine a topic like you could a student and say, study this. You have to give the machine a vast amount of words, knowledge, symbols, billions and billions of words in some of the larger models, train it repeatedly so that it can identify patterns within that large amount of data. If the system hallucinates or gives an incorrect response, you can't train just that material out of the system. You have to either change your training approach, in some cases, try to rework your model. And as these systems continue to change, if you rely on specific prompts to specific systems, it's very likely that that is all going to be different in the future. I think it's much better to train people with the foundational knowledge, acknowledging that they're going to use AI undoubtedly in the future, as we all already are. But you cannot learn to identify truth by looking at the output of a system. You need context, you need the human information in order to do that. And there's a famous rule in AI as well that we call the 80-20 rule. It's kind of an informal rule, but whenever you start to make advances in AI, you make a lot of advances very, very rapidly. And we've certainly seen that over the last couple of years with generative AI. But then you come to the last 20%, in some cases, the really important parts that are going to pull it all together. And it proves to be an almost impossible nut to crack. This is the current hangup with self-driving cars. We certainly have them in some forms. We have nothing that's capable of driving on any roadway like competent humans are. And they've been telling us for at least a decade that they're right around the corner. And this is a well-established fact within AI research. And generative AI in particular seems to be having issues with scaling up, just introducing more problems, more hallucinations. So I think there's a danger in relying on current systems, realizing that it's all going to change in ways that we can't predict.
Thank you, Dr. Locklair. We're going to move to a dialogue section now, wherein we will ask constructive questions to each other.
Do you want a certain order?
Um,
I can ask first.
yeah, you go first.
Okay. What are from the computer science angle, what are some issues that you run into in terms of, I know you can write Python with it. Are you guys worried about teaching basic coding skills and that that's going to become a thing of the past now?
I'm glad you asked the coding question, because this is actually a really good example for the type of stuff we're talking about. So all the hype these days now is that some of the CEOs are saying, well, we're about to replace all human coders with AI. And the people who actually investigate this are pretty sure that the answer is no, for these reasons. It absolutely can generate code. You can take a basic programming assignment, you can go to one of these tools, you can put in that prompt, and it'll give you code that in many cases is pretty good, works, all of that. But as you increase the complexity of the prompt, as you ask it to generate not just the answer for an introductory coding class, but entire systems, especially systems that it doesn't have good training data for. So if you're trying to do something new or innovative, it's not going to do as well with that. Most of the examples you see where people generate entire programs are because they're doing something that there's a lot of data out there. Okay? There's a lot of GitHubs, there's a lot of Stack Exchanges, Stack Overflows that are already talking about this. The other thing that AI is not that good at yet is bug fixing at scale. When you ask it to fix a bug, sometimes it will do what we call refactor all the code. It will rewrite the whole thing. Sometimes that results in other things breaking. Sometimes that results in other features that you created disappearing because the AI is focused on fixing the bug and it can't put it together into a cohesive whole. Interestingly, I was reading just a couple of weeks ago, the companies that are really leaning into the automated coding assistants, the vast majority say they aren't really seeing any efficiency gains yet from them. Now, I certainly think there will be efficiency gains as we go along and as these systems get better, but here's the risk. If you go through your introductory programming course having the AI do it for you, then when you get into industry, now the problems are bigger. Now you're spending more of your time bug fixing. Now you have to fix a bug while maintaining other features as well. That's exactly the kind of thing that the AI assistants are not any good at yet. And there's some doubt as to how good they can be at that. So it's kind of, to use the Star Wars analogy here, it's kind of the quick and easy path. It's like the dark side. Yeah, it'll do your introductory assignment. But the goal of the introductory assignment is not to teach you how to print hello world to the screen. It's to help you start to learn, here are the fundamental building blocks that you're then going to assemble into a larger program. So hopefully I'm not spending all our time on this answer, but that's an excellent example of how, is it going to be a good tool? Yeah, if I'm a Python developer and I need to integrate with a new system or there's some interface I'm not familiar with, I could use a tool to say, hey, what's the framework for integrating with this other system? And it could give it to me, and I could save some time having to look that all up myself. But I still need to possess the knowledge of how the code is working in order to troubleshoot, in order to do the things that the AI can't.
Thank you. I think
Was that an answer?
It's an answer in the sense that we need to start thinking about how AI is going to affect specific disciplines, because there's not going to be one solution for the whole university. It's going to be discipline specific.
Yeah.
And computer science, you guys have it really hard because you can't say, oh, we're moving to handwritten assignments now. I mean, I don't think anybody wants to write 100 lines of code by hand. I could be wrong. Computer science people are pretty impressive, and Run might do it. So it's important to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is something that I think you can't dictate this at the university level. I think every school, every department is going to have to think about this and what makes sense for their application. What I tell students is, I'll do some basic checks for this kind of stuff, but I'm not going to, be some sort of overly strict authoritarian who's going to try to get you if I see like 2 words that look like maybe they came from ChatGPT. I want you to understand a couple of things. Number one, use of the tool could be detrimental to you later on if you don't build the foundation. Number two, like Professor Hahn said, I want to create assignments that are meaningful to you so you don't want to cheat with them. And I want to help you see the value in you learning it and not just passing it off to the AI, because what we want to pass up to the AI is the stuff that we don't care about. It's all the busy work. It's all here's the 51st time I've had to fill out this same form. Why do I have to do it again?
It sounds like AI is useful.
Oh, it absolutely is. If I didn't think it was useful, I don't think they'd ask me to teach all the undergraduate AI courses. The problem is that in computer science in particular, we like to have the answers for everything. We like to have the one answer. And I think that's driven a lot of the large language models, is we're trying to create the one massive AI system that's going to do everything well. And I think that's one of the reasons why there is a move now towards agents, which are actually smaller systems that are trained to do specific tasks, because we've realized that LLMs are not the answer, at least not in that regard.
Sounds right. I take your word for it.
So I'm interested from a philosophy perspective, as you think about creating assignments that students don't want to use for AI or that it's not good at, what does that look like to you?
Yeah, so some of the possible models are going back to oral exams, which sounds awful because I used to hate those, but it's more of let's have a conversation and see if you understand what's going on. That's actually the Socratic model. Okay. That's how they used to do it, right? And it was actually, it seems like a weird progressive thing, but that's actually just how the Greeks would do education. Another example would be cultivating a better relationship in terms of professor-student collaboration. If you look at the way that European universities used to run, it was very much not on this day you write a paper, and now an assignment, and now a quiz. We have to do those things because that's how American standards work. But I'm not sure they're that helpful. I think we have a real opportunity to move to a model that is at once more classical and also more progressive at the same time. That's why I'm excited about what CELT is doing, because I think it could be really, really helpful. In philosophy, I recommend that students who are using it competently at higher levels think of it as sort of an advanced Google. So you can put in something like, who are the top 3 scholars who have clarified Aquinas' argument for God's existence? Okay, and then it'll give you maybe even a link to where to find them. So it saves you time. So it saves you time, which is a quantitative thing, but you shouldn't think of it as doing something qualitatively different. And if you do start to think that way, like maybe you're dialoguing with it, you should be really careful, because you should probably just go dialogue with your classmates.
Boy, it's kind of hard to think of this as a debate because I kind of feel like we're on the same page with all this. I think what you described is a good use because you're using it as a starting point. Here's some information to get you started, to save some of the initial research time, but you're not just taking its word for it. Simple questions like that, it's probably going to do okay with. Again, you do have to remember it's not exactly a search engine because it is not a database and it is probabilistic, but what I hear there is probably a good use.
Yeah, and you've got to follow up with
Yes.
whatever sources you find.
Yeah. And I like what you said about the Socratic circle. I know some of my students are sick of hearing me talk about that, but this model that we have where you have tests and exams and you memorize information and then you start teaching to the test and it becomes the filling of the bucket rather than the lighting of the flame, I think is a mistake that we have made in education. And if this motivates us to go back to more of the dialogue, the collaboration, the working together, I think that could absolutely be a positive.
We're going to go to closing.
Are there questions from
Yes.
Oh, okay. So who closes first? Okay. So in closing, I want to go back to a couple points that Dr. Locklair made. First of all, it is true. AI can't do everything. Poor AI. It's trying so hard to fix coding bugs. It can't do it. Can't make cars self-drive en masse. But there's a lot that it can do. It can predict things much better than humans can at much greater scale with much more data. It can help us cure diseases more quickly, help us detect financial fraud more quickly. And if we at least don't have a basic understanding of how to use it and how to use it responsibly, because let's face it, everybody uses it, most everybody uses it or has tried it, right? So you're going to use it. You may as well know how to use it well and how to use it responsibly to understand the limitations. I will say there's a big caveat to my argument, which is I do think that it is a net positive for us to embrace AI well understood. I don't think AI is overall a good thing for the world. I do think that globally the costs are much greater than the benefits. But absent massive global nuclear disarmament style legislation, we're not going to get that. Given that AI is here and you can't escape it, it's good that the university do the best it can to educate on it and to implement it responsibly. So AI is going to change the world, assuming it doesn't destroy it. Industries move forward, universities are helped. Our students are using it whether we like it or not. So let's teach them to use it well and motivate them to not use it sometimes. Thank you.
I'll try not to make my closing sound exactly the same as if it was plagiarized or generated. Let's not get into this. Where's Temish? We need to talk about. Yeah. So yes, I would agree. It is here. We need to understand how to use it, how to understand how to use it responsibly. Like any technology, there are times to use it and times not to use it. I think of any technology that people have developed. Think of television. Television can certainly be used for good purposes as well as bad. There's a quote from Mr. Rogers that I particularly gravitate towards. This in my 5 minutes of internet research, I think this is something he actually said. But he once was asked about getting into television, and he says something to the effect of, I got into it because I hated it. And he wanted to make it into something better. So there's definitely uses for all of these tools. There's uses for AI. I would caution people as we talk about AI doing things better than humans, however. It is definitely true that AI can do mathematical operations faster than people because computers can do math faster than people. But everything that the current AI systems do is based on their training data. They cannot do or learn anything that is not found in some form in their data. Now, these data sets are so vast that the AI can identify patterns that it would take humans a very, very long time to identify. But we need to be careful of endowing them with superhuman characteristics. I think that affects the way that we approach them and causes us to be more willing to rely on them. I absolutely agree. We must understand when to use, when not to use, because there is a time for both. One of my frustrations with my field is we seem to think AI is the answer for everything, and research, and it's very clearly not. But yes, study it, learn it, remember what it is, remember its limitations, and remember that the costs are not just here in the university. There are costs in data privacy. There are costs in surveillance. There is cost in control and manipulation as companies create AIs that give you an entity's preferred answer. So keep an open mind, learn how they work and what their vulnerabilities are.
According to ChatGPT, Mr. Roberts did say that.
Good to know. I'm validated now.
All right, thank you. Can we give a round of applause for the missed audience? All right, so the CS Club came up with some questions. Some of them have been answered, some of them have not. This one is interesting. The title on this one is personalized learning. Can AI-driven tutors? Oh, you're annoying. Can AI-driven tutors and educational tools genuinely adapt to individual student needs better than traditional methods?
Start with That's a very interesting question. I'll try not to play the definition game, but it does depend on what you mean by adapt and what you mean by better. An AI is good at identifying patterns. So if you're talking about things like looking at a student's test scores to identify what level you're at, or maybe what course you should be placed in, then yeah, I think there's value there in that type of statistical analysis. But again, if you're thinking about what I think one of the real purposes of education is, and that's building relationships between instructors and students with the intention of helping both develop, I don't think AI can ever do that. Let's put aside the probabilistic nature for a second. It might just be wrong. Of course, human beings can be wrong as well, but at least I, as an instructor, I have a concept of truth, and I'm able to effectively fact check myself if necessary in a way that the AI isn't. It goes back to the intentions. Dr. Werner Gitt, who's a Christian creationist computer scientist who did a lot of work with information, talks about the idea of information. You need to have a meaning accorded by a sender. There needs to be a purpose and an intended recipient. AI doesn't have a purpose other than match a pattern. It might work out or it might not. So I'm very, very skeptical of those sorts of things because we are getting to these levels of truth and information and interaction, probabilistic nature, mistakes, hallucinations. I'm skeptical.
If you ever tried doing individualized instruction via AI, just ask yourself if you feel better afterwards or if you feel worse. You'll feel worse after talking to the AI. Hopefully you feel better after talking to your professor. If not, that might be a different problem. But we intuitively know, as part of our form of life, that human interaction can't be replaced. It can't. And there's all kinds of movies about it, right? We still don't believe it. There's all kinds of movies about why you shouldn't do things just because you can. We still do it anyway. So we're not learning our lesson, but deep inside us, we do know this is not real instruction at the end of the day.
Thought of one thing. My kids always ask me, why are there 6 Jurassic Park movies? Why didn't they learn their lesson after the first one? And that's kind of the point of Jurassic Park. Another movie that I'll recommend, I haven't seen the whole thing, but this has been recommended to me. It's a movie, I believe it's about 10 years old. It's called Her, starring Joaquin Phoenix, who, I'll give the real short thumbnail sketcher, falls in love with an AI system. It's not from a Christian perspective, but it's still a very interesting exploration of some of the consequences of that. So if you Don't watch it on a night when you're feeling depressed though, because it's not a happy story.
Steven Spielberg's AI is wonderful.
All right. The next one that we haven't touched on. Should professors incorporate AI tools into their teaching, or does this undermine traditional instructional methods?
My students are going to hate me for this answer. It depends. Depends on, oh yeah, I know, I knew that was coming. So what's the purpose of the tool? What is the tool doing? Are you using some kind of statistical tool to grade true false quizzes? I mean, that's probably a good thing. I'm not sure what other tools I would use it for in terms of doing things like, automatically grading papers or things of that nature again, because I think the human interaction is an important component of that. One of the things I think that keeps me from giving a bunch of bad assignments is I feel the need to grade them all and look at them. And if I don't want to read an assignment, maybe I shouldn't be assigning it, or maybe it doesn't have value as it's currently constructed. Again, in terms of learning about it, how it works, absolutely. I tell my students about it all the time. We talk about examples, they see the systems. But in terms of what I do as my interactions with students, I don't think it's a good fit or appropriate.
I agree by and large. I will say, I want to harken back to something I said earlier, which is that AI, insofar as it affects the classroom, doesn't create problems, it exposes them. So here's kind of what I mean by that. And what Dr. Locklair is saying is a perfect example. Let's say you create a writing assignment and you upload it on Blackboard. People, let's say it's an online class. People download it, they fill it out, they do the assignment, whatever. And then it's like click, 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 then it goes into the system. And now the professor has to, read it. But there's no human interaction at all between the professor and the student. It's just like, here's my pixels. Now I'm having pixels. Hey, I may as well use an AI to rearrange my pixels. Why not you as well, right? So now it's AIs just talking to each other and no one's actually doing anything. But is that a problem? Of course it is. But AI didn't create the problem. We already had an educational structure where the professor and the student weren't talking to each other. So my contention is that's the actual problem. And once we do that, this is your lighting the fire, then we won't have to worry because you don't cheat on things you care about. Yeah, I'll leave it there, I guess.
You want an interesting conversation? Ask me about my thoughts on online education after the debate.
Let's see here. Oh, there's some feedback. Professor Hahn, you've touched on this a little bit, but will AI revolutionize academic research, or does it pose a threat to traditional scholarly work?
Yes and yes. Will it revolutionize work? So in my field, philosophy, what we're interested in doing at the sort of high level is building arguments. So a lot of you guys from Western thought, Anselm's argument, right? That you have this idea of God as the greatest conceivable being, therefore he must exist. And it's like, how do you just have an idea in your head and then you say that it's real? Well, there are people who work through that over hundreds of pages because they're that interested in it. And they're like, is this argument good? And oftentimes you're doing very careful logical analysis. Do you make a mistake in this line? Do you make a mistake in that line? And a lot of high-level researchers are saying eventually the AI is going to get good enough at learning, at least at the scale of an article, what a good argument is. And yes, it's pattern recognition, but it's good enough. It's good enough that it will eventually write better articles than we do. But the reason why we shouldn't necessarily worry about that, well, if the AI can do it better, maybe that's sad because we're not doing it anymore. Or maybe that means that what we were doing actually wasn't that valuable. Because if an AI can do it well, maybe it's not a truly human thing.
That is a very interesting point because we talk about AI doing pattern matching and I know this came up in the senior seminar presentation earlier today a little bit. If all we're doing is pattern matching, is that really valuable? I look at I look at a lot of research articles. I'll pick on my own field, computer science. And the one thing that me doing my PhD taught me was that you can make a research article say anything you want to say, depending on how you gather your data and phrase the question. So it's interesting. I think a lot of academic research is, I have to self-censor here, a little bit pointless. And the really important stuff, as Professor Hahn is saying, that's not necessarily what goes into a research article. And then again, there's the issue with hallucinations and the probabilistic, and you're still going to have all the AI stuff reviewed to make sure that the number didn't come up wrong in some point.
One more. That might say. No, that's. One more. This one's kind of addressing. I can tell you. One more question from the CS club questions. Does AI signal a paradigm shift in how knowledge is acquired and validated? And should we embrace or resist this transformation?
I'm going to go back to my standard bag of tricks here. What do you mean by knowledge? Because I don't think AI has knowledge. What AI does really well is catalog symbols. Now, of course, you can manipulate symbols and discover knowledge wherein, but again, AI has no intentionality, no understanding. I don't think it's really going to do that because it's learning the patterns that we've established. It can put them together in different ways. But in terms of actual knowledge, I don't really think so. And I think that this is one of the things that the proponents of the large language models were really excited about when they first came out, because they thought that it was going to be some sort of path to we're actually going to create a mind now. And it didn't take very long before holes started being poked in that. And despite all the hype, there are still some researchers, a lot of researchers actually, who aren't invested in all of that. But in terms of actual knowledge, the things we do that are worthwhile, I don't think it's really going to do that.
So I will say yes and also no. Probably yes in the short term and no in the long term, because of course you can't have yes and no at the same time, right? Law of non-contradiction. So yes in the short term, because right now our language is mostly stable. We know what symbols, and I'm going to do a Wittgenstein picture theory thing. It works for some things, right? We know what our words mean. If I say, polar bear, you all kind of know what I mean by that. And could AI really help me learn more about polar bears? Sure, it could. I could become in the top 0.01% of polar bear experts tonight if I wanted to, like in my living room. Of all people, of all the 6 billion people, easily. Now, what does that mean though? And you could too, right? On anything. What does that mean though? It means that short term, we're going to have things like you're self-diagnosing for diseases better than ever. You're self-diagnosing, well, I won't get into mental health. That's a don't ever do that. Don't ever talk to AI about things like that. We haven't even talked about the demonic yet, but that is a conversation that needs to be had at some point. And the proclivities of the people who are creating these models is another thing too. So, but not to get off track, in the long term, because all AI does is symbol match, if we get to a point where there's a critical mass of us who are all relying on AI, eventually no one is going to know what the symbols actually stand for. We will become just like the AI, where we actually can't talk to each other because there's no more shared basis for communication. And that's why I think AI could be civilization ending. If it destroys the very fabric of our language, that would be apocalyptic.
Yeah, I'll just hop in on the mental health thing real quick. Yeah, that's a horrible idea because again, remember the intention of an AI is to give you statistically the most likely response. And one of the other goals that all of these technological systems have these days is to keep you engaged and keep you interacting with it. Imagine if you're talking to a pastor or a counselor and their goal is not to help you, but their goal is to keep you coming back, interacting with them. That's maybe a best case for what AI might be doing, and that's pretty horrifying. So yeah, absolutely. Again, it's a bigger conversation, as Professor Hahn said, but yeah, absolutely one of the worst ideas possible.
I'll try this one more time. Has feedback. Did it fix it? Oh, maybe. All right. That was the end of the CS questions that you guys hadn't covered in your wonderful presentation and debate. I have the first question from the audience. Can you guys, especially you, Professor Hahn, can you elaborate more on what you see as AI as more classical and progressive at the same time?
So it's not so much that AI is going to be classical and progressive. It's that our response to AI could be thought of as both. So what if we implement more Socratic dialogue methods in our classes? What if we do more oral examinations? What if we do more handwritten assignments? And they're not going to be as long. Handwriting is hard, and we're not going to be cruel to people. And we know the research on handwriting versus typing, right? It's much better. So that looks more classical, right? Because you're doing less technology, but it's also, in a sense, very progressive because we're saying, let's think in an alternate way. Let's think in a way that isn't the standard. Let's depart from whatever the current American vogue is. This is one of the reasons, just to be political for a second, why politicians like Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders are so interesting, because what do they have in common? They're questioning the established order. And oftentimes they sound very similar. If you actually just look past the, what do they say about immigration and how exploitative it is? It sounds very close sometimes. Similarly with educational methods, oftentimes questioning the status quo can draw on what looks like both ends of a radical spectrum. Concretely, more dialogues, more relationships, higher trust. We need to talk about the high trust classroom as a concept and how to build those.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at a Christian institution like Concordia, we're very well positioned to do all those things. We have our emphasis on small class sizes. I think that lends itself very well to what Professor Hahn's talking about with dialogue, relationships, getting to know each other and interact with each other. Just as Christians, we know that we've never adhered to the status quo. Which is why I'm sometimes interested in attempts sometimes to make all our Christian universities look exactly like every other university out there. I always think of the words of First Samuel when the people come to Samuel and say, "Give us a king like all the other nations have." So I think we here are in a position to do something different. It's not avoiding the technology. It's not running from it. It's teaching people how to use it and also recognizing what it can't do and educating people effectively in those ways as well.
So in other words, the Israelites didn't want to live on common.
Is this being recorded?
All right, we're gonna take questions from the audience. All right. Right here. Okay.
Do you want to pass around this one and let us do that?
Yeah, that might be easier. Switch.
So probably more geared towards Professor Hahn's argument, but bits and pieces of your argument sound really similar. That's the word. Similar to arguments for the legalization of marijuana. So example, that's a weird example, but people are using it anyway. People are going to continue using it. So why don't we just make it legal? And I understand learning about AI, and so all of us probably have learned about marijuana and its effects in a high school health class, and that's very important. But that doesn't mean that it becomes that we should use it or that it should become legalized. So then kind of my question is, will not, because of our sinful world, the use of AI in higher education always lead to reliance, or is that an individual matter that weaker individuals are the ones who are led to reliance and not everyone will be? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's very lucid. So three thoughts. Statistically, number one, statistically, we should do a study on that last question of yours. I suspect that my hypothesis would be that people who use AI to cheat were willing to cheat anyway and would have done so. The question is there a sort of middle slice of people who are fine without AI, but now that it's here, they're using it or abusing it? So if that chunk of students is way bigger than I think it is, then maybe I'm wrong, but I think we could still retool, and the programs that do need AI to keep up with industry could still use it. The analogy to marijuana is interesting. It doesn't quite work for two reasons. One is that marijuana is, in my view, an inherently harmful for most cases. There are some cases where there are legitimate medical uses. There's probably legitimate medical uses of cocaine as well. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about general widespread use. I don't think that AI is inherently harmful in the same way. So in the micro realm, which is to say a small sort of within a certain institution, it would make sense to say we're going to use AI but not marijuana, because one of these is like inherently harmful with no real benefit outside of a medical prescription and hedonism, or maybe another vanishingly small number of cases. But AI actually does have some legitimate uses. At the global level, I actually would have the same solution for both, which is they both need to be gotten rid of. But the difference is, since neither one is going to both be gotten rid of, what do we do at the micro level while we wait for things to happen? Well, no marijuana, because that's just not good, and you might get schizophrenia someday. But AI, I think you can use without harm. Again, granted, assuming that band of students isn't too wide.
Yeah, I would just follow up with one thing, and this is kind of a comment about how we create technology today in general. A lot of technology is designed to addict you. If you think about mobile apps, free-to-play games, how that's changed over the past decade, everything about the design of literally 99% of mobile apps today is designed to do one thing, and that's to keep you engaged with it, to keep you interacting with it, to keep you spending money on it. It's not about anything else. And unfortunately, we talk about this in my user experience class, technology, we have gotten really good at figuring out how to psychologically manipulating people into using technology. The studies about the dangers of screens, that is absolutely a real thing. And I think AI, again, this goes to my concerns more with the people who create it, is being designed the same way. That's why we give it this, this conversational human veneer that it doesn't really have, because it's just pattern matching. It's all designed to keep you interacting with it. So as you use AI, I agree, there's good uses, but you do have to be aware, what is the goal of the person who created this AI? It's almost universally going to be to keep you interacting with it, to make you dependent on it. So keep that in mind as you use it. And that goes for all technology, by the way.
Thank you. We have another question over here.
Hello. So I believe that AI systems can perpetuate and even amplify existing societal biases. Do you think AI has embedded biases? And if yes, what are the dangers of that?
That's a great question. I think the answer is absolutely yes, because AI is trained on data that's created by human beings. Human beings have biases. Therefore, the AI is going to pick this up. A number of years ago, Microsoft was working on a chatbot that they called their Tay AI, and this predates the current Chat GPT things, but it's a similar sort of thing. And they had to deactivate it like the day they turned it on because it basically turned into a Nazi because of the data that it was trained on. Even today, researchers will say it is very hard to keep a large language model from just diving into the absolute worst examples of bias, the way that human beings treat each other poorly. Because remember, AI is not some super entity above us. It's something that we create. We use our data to train it. And if that data contains evidence of our human sinfulness, then the AI is absolutely going to reflect it. And there's actually been studies done that show that AI can reflect biases against different groups because that's what shows up in its training data.
Yeah, I'm glad that this question comes up because the moderation question we haven't really discussed yet. And so, you know, there's and this gets into sort of the metaphysics of AI. So what is the difference between a filter on an AI and just what the AI is already doing, right? So it's not like there's this pure thing called the AI that is just like giving you truth. And they're like, but we don't want you to talk about this, this, and that. That's, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not how it works. So the question, I guess, to be as unbiased as possible, what we need to do is to say, when it comes to, let's say, drawing statistical conclusions or pattern matching or whatever, is it better than humans at this, or is it worse? It could be worse morally than humans. It could just be taking the worst things about us and amplifying them. But it could also be better. Theoretically, if the AI is trained in such a way that it's better than humans at something, which sometimes it is, because it's faster, it can do more data, maybe AI will generate things that actually undermine and contravene and remove harmful biases. That's at least a possibility. Because if in certain small sectors the AI is better than humans, then we could use it to make discoveries that would overturn incorrect biases, possibly.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. And the other thing that I would just add is that AI only knows what you tell it, and it will draw conclusions based on the data you give it. And especially if you give it incomplete data or it's missing context, you know, this is the number one thing that I look at when I look at any research study. I look at how was the question phrased and what data do you actually have here? So if you ask the AI to draw a correlation, it absolutely will, whether that reflects reality or not.
So I have a question going back to kind of using AI in the classroom. And Professor Hahn brought up the concept of using AI to kind of like, I don't know if this is how you would do it, but like kind of spark the learning process, use it to like maybe give you sources, that kind of thing. But my question goes to, is it beneficial to actually do that? Or is it better to take the slower, drawn out process? Because I feel like in today's society, there's so much of an emphasis on being efficient and being as quick with your time as possible. But in reality, if you're using AI to give you the ideas and give you the sources, are you facilitating the learning process in the best way possible? And kind of like as a secondary question to that, can you become, because you brought up the example, Professor Hahn, of the polar bear, could you truly become an expert on something without ever having physically interacted with it? And so I guess those are kind of like tied together, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. So I agree with the first point, which is one can become too focused on efficiency and on getting quick results. Of course, everyone has to draw a line somewhere. Are you going to stop Googling? Are you going to not use library search lookups? Rather, you're going to meander through the library and just look at books till you find one you like. That sounds lovely, by the way. You know, when was the last time any of us did that? So where do you draw that line? That's a tough question. I'm not trying to play a where do you draw the line game, because you've got to draw a line, you know, you got to draw it somewhere. And I think it's going to depend on the specific context. And I wish I could say more than that. But as for the polar bear thing, could you become an expert on something without knowing it? Well, It's going to depend on whether that is knowledge of the forms or knowledge of the particulars objects. I think you can know quite a bit about the form of a polar bear by reading the Wikipedia article on polar bears, but you wouldn't actually know, Knut the polar bear or something.
For sure. I think one of the things that I often think about, and it is a little bit of a cliche, but when I'm teaching, I want to lead students to discovering the answer for themselves in a way, rather than just I stand up front and say, here's the answer to every question that's going to be on the test. Now memorize that. Now that's kind of an extreme example. And I think part of the risk with AI is there's a temptation because of its appearance to use it for more than just kind of that initial prompt or that initial kick. That initial prompt you still have to verify that, because whenever I look at people who try to use this for research, there's a good number of them who say, well, it's going to give me articles that don't exist, or it's going to, like, make up scientists who never existed. So I think it can be good, but again, because of the appearance, I think it's very, very easy to then view it in a way that it's not, and it's very easy to then kind of slip into it's going to give me the answers rather than I'm going to use it as a jumping off point for my own investigation. If that makes sense.
And I want to add, there might be a sort of bias that we have here because we're both sort of like in a highly specialized academic environment. When I ask ChatGPT a research question, or the prompt is usually very long, and then after the first response, I start to get suspicious because I know the field and I'm thinking there's some fishy pattern matching going on here. It's not right. That's not the kind of thing that everyone is going to just be like, ooh, let's keep going. So I think that maybe it depends on how much sort of background.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there is also kind of a danger with that, because you see, I mean, it does a lot of stuff well. You see, successes and good uses, and then you start to think that it can do these other things as well. So again, kind of the true capabilities of the thing become a little obscured. And as you get more deeply into the subject and become more specialized, you start to realize that it paradoxically becomes less useful.
I guess, like, if I can follow up on that, I would say you kind of answered my question, but I was thinking more like super, super basic. Because if you think about when you're in elementary school and you're learning math, it's an absolute pain in the butt to do long division by hand. But you still have to do long division by hand. And then once you get to be older and you understand the process, then you're allowed to start using a calculator. So I guess kind of like with that concept in mind, maybe that's more of the area I was asking for you guys to address.
Okay, so I'm gonna pull Dr. Sanders in here, but she made a great distinction in one of our discussion groups between the process and the product of an educational endeavor. So the question of every educational class topic assignment, are you aiming at a process or are you aiming at a product? In long division, we're not training you in long division because we think you're going to have to go to the store and start drawing like little brackets and working things out. That would be product. No, we want you to do the process because we think there's something valuable about having your mind go through matching these numbers in a certain way and understand them. Other times there maybe is more of a product sort of a thing. For example, nobody is too worried anymore that we use sewing machines instead of knitting everything by hand or sewing everything by hand. Except there are people a minority of people who still think that process is something worth pursuing and cultivating. That's good. So it's very situational. I would say in philosophy, we're very process oriented, and we need to retool a lot of our classes to reflect that.
I think in general, American higher education has become very product oriented, and I think that we should be more process oriented. And that plays into some of the conversation here about exposing problems that have already been here, rather than, oh, it's causing a lot of issues. It was already.
All right, I have one more question. And then if you have more questions for them, you can ask afterwards.
So for the next generation, because we've been talking a lot about like what are the connotations of AI for our classes and our higher education. But for the next generation growing up with AI not being necessarily a new concept for them, they're just in it. It's natural for them. I feel like since it's new to us, we can take a step back and examine it more. But what are some of the consequences that could potentially arise from a generation that's just used to AI and uses it for everything? Like my 6-year-old cousin just uses Chat GPT or character AI just naturally, and that's something that's foreign to me. So I was just wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
As a Xennial, a person born between 1977 and 1983, and we're often described as having an analog childhood. I know it's a made-up term, but I like the analog childhood and then the transition into the digital world, the consumer advent of the internet in the 1990s and all of that stuff. I feel like I have a little perspective. I don't like seeing what's happened to the younger generation. Now, I mean, even aside from AI, just technology in general, I'll pick on smartphones. I think that there's research which pretty conclusively proves, and I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but that smartphone use is bad for you. Now, certainly there's lots of good things you can do with your smartphone. You can stay in touch with people, you can access information, all these sorts of things. But it again, with this reliance on the technology to the detriment of your other skills, the fact that it is designed to kind of hook you, I think it's very important for us to, number one, I mean, as with all technology, parents have to be involved with their kids to help them navigate. I don't think you hide technology from your kids by any means, but I think that there are times when it's appropriate to restrict it, to have conversations with them about what are appropriate uses and what are not. And you can't have that if you don't have an understanding of what AI or these technologies are actually doing. So I think there is a danger. I see kind of a smartphone analogy here, where if we don't really step up and teach people what the good uses are, then the bad uses will come to dominate.
How do I say this? I think kids should not ever have smartphones or technology as we use that term. I just don't think it should be a thing. I think it's bad. What age? I don't know. Not 5, you know. It's awful to watch 2-year-olds on iPads, right? And you're starting to sound like a boomer now. You're like, oh, all these kids, they're on their tech. I didn't have a cell phone till I was 12. All right. But it's terrible because the consequences are like no grasp whatsoever of truth, of what a valuable source is, of like, can I ask my dad something? Like, oh, ChatGPT knows better than my dad. Are you kidding me? So very well pointed out. And it's not even that weird to not give your kids a phone. I think it would be interesting to experiment with you know how sometimes at some schools you have to like turn in your phone when you enter the classroom. I wonder what if we did that here. I don't know. It might be really unpopular, but it's something we could try.
I mean, again, technology is a tool, and a tool is supposed to be used to support human activities. The tool is not the end. The tool is not the goal. And I think that sometimes, we think, oh, well, we have to teach kids about technology. No, we don't. The people who created computers didn't have computers growing up. The people who made smartphones didn't have smartphones growing up. The people who created AI didn't have AI growing up. So I think there is a fallacy here that somehow the tool is the deciding factor, and I don't really think it is. And I would echo what Professor Hahn said. Don't give your kids smartphones.
Until after they had a gun, because guns are less dangerous. It can be ought to be used more carefully than a phone can. I'm not saying guns are dangerous, they are. Phones are more dangerous.
One of those things is specifically designed to keep you interacting with it 24/7. It's not the gun.
All right. Thank you all for taking time out of your Friday evening, spending it with us. Can we give a big round of applause to the rest of it? All right. 3 things. 1, if you want to be on the here about the more events like this for next year, there's a sign-up sheet up there by Ellen. Ellen, can you wave it? Yes, thank you. Please put your email on there so you can receive emails about these things happening on campus. 2, there's a whole bunch of food up there, and pop and such. I have enough sugar on a daily basis. Soda, Coke, depends on where you're from. Pop. Please take that. My roommate and I eat enough sugar as it is. There was a third thing. Oh yeah. A little plug for a class next year. Philosophy of language is being offered next semester, and we discuss what it means to be, what language really means as a human, and it'll be taught by Professor Hahn. So that's not certain. Oh yes, God willing that he gets rehired, it will be taught by Professor Hahn. So I would love to see, it would be a great class to take if you have time in your schedule.
Now, can I plug 2 classes?
Yes, go ahead. Okay.
So first, I'm going to plug a philosophy class that absolutely everybody in this room should take, and that's philosophy of mind. Does that have a prerequisite?
No.
Depends on who you ask. Everyone with any kind of passing interest in anything that we've talked about tonight should absolutely be taking philosophy of mind. The new AI major, when it finally gets approved, is going to require that course, and I'm very excited about that. The other course that I would plug, if you want kind of the ground level view of the hot AI stuff, machine learning, all of this, is CSE 2400 machine learning. I teach that, so that's why I plugged it second. But we try to do kind of a ground floor exploration, get you in. We get up to the current level stuff, so I think it's enough to give you a solid framework to work with, and maybe we'll convert you to either computer science or philosophy in those classes.
All right, thank you all.